Okay, a little different than our usual. We know that the Seder, right after we make Kiddush, everybody goes and washes their hands, and we eat Karpas. Okay, so we're going to talk about a specific part of that, and that is which vegetable to use by that part of the Seder for Karpas. There's a whole bunch of things we're not going to talk about that have to do with Karpas, and they are, we're just going to touch for a second on why we eat Karpas. We're really not going to talk about that. How do you answer the question, why we're eating it, why wash your hands, if you should do a seba, how much you should eat, if you should wash first or dip it first, and we almost for sure are not going to get to which liquid you should dip it into. We're just going to focus on one part of it, which is which vegetables should a person use. Okay, so
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
An introduction. So if a person has a specific family minhag, you're not recommending they change their minhag based on your shit.
Well, a person should follow the minhag, and we'll see that you can basically you can do whatever you want. So I'm getting to that. We're going to explain to you the advantages, disadvantages of different vegetables, but yes, basically you should do whatever your family does. That's correct. Good point.
Basically, okay. You don't understand what we're doing.
A little bit, or not understand what we're doing, do it anyhow. Okay. Okay. The Mishnah tells us that you have to eat 2 vegetables at the same time. Okay? The second vegetable is what we call maror, and the Mishnah is very clear what you're supposed to eat when you get to maror. It tells you 5 vegetables that you're supposed to eat from, and the Gemara talks about more details, but it's very clear exactly what you're supposed to eat. Okay? The first vegetable, the Mishnah and the Gemara are saying nothing about what that's supposed to be. It just says eat a vegetable. Okay? And basically, that's why the din really is you can eat anything you like to. Basically, you can eat whatever you want to. Okay, so but before we get to see why there are certain preferences of eating things, first we're going to talk about 3 types of vegetables that you're supposed to avoid. 3 things that the place can say you should not eat those vegetables. Okay, then we'll see which ones you have a reason why you specifically should eat them. Okay, and the first is, the Gemara says that you can't eat, for the first vegetable, you can't eat any vegetable that will be good enough for maror. Okay, so if you eat romaine lettuce for maror, you can't eat romaine lettuce as the first vegetable. I shouldn't say not if you eat it. Since romaine lettuce is good for maror, you're not allowed to eat romaine lettuce as the first vegetable. Okay, as what we call karpas. Okay, that comes up. Lamaisa is that there are some poskim who hold. There are very few. There's a Chacham Shlomo holds that radishes are kosher from maror. And all the poskim who we're going to see later, some different names, who say that radishes should be used for karpas, all those people are disagreeing with this Chacham Shlomo. Okay, the Gemara says you can't, whatever is good for maror can't be eaten at karpas. So anybody who says you should eat radishes, which is lots of people, is going not like that. And of course that's the din. The din is that you don't, radishes are not kosher for maror. Okay, there's a Maril who asks that he wonders why people use parsley for karpas when he thinks that parsley might be ulshin. Ulshin is one of the 5 vegetables you can eat from maror, and the Beis Yosef brings it, and he brings rayas that it's not true, and ulshin is something else. Ulshin is not parsley, so parsley from that perspective would have been okay. Okay, what we're not going to talk about is that there's a shaila in Din, one of the persons stuck in the hospital, and the only vegetable that they have is maror. That's the only vegetable they have. There's a whole to do in the Gemara and the poskim what he should do, how he should manage to eat the 2 vegetables when he only has things that are kosher for maror. We're not talking about that. Okay. The next thing you're not. So the first thing you're not allowed to use was something that could be used for maror. The second is, just about everybody knows that there's a question why we don't make a bracha on maror. Okay, when we come to that point in the Seder, we wash hamoitzi and we wash and we make hamoitzi on the matzah, but we don't make a bracha on the maror that comes right afterwards. Okay, it's a machlokes why we don't. It's obvious, for sure we don't. That's the Gemara that we don't do it. The question is why we don't. One of the opinions is we don't do it because the hadama we made on the earlier vegetable, on the karpas, covers this also. No, the bar priyadama. Why don't we make a bracha on a bar priyadama? So it's a machlokes, and one of the explanations is it's the hadama we made on the earlier vegetable that covers this one also. Lemela, the Mishnah Berurah says, if a person is going to be eating, let's say, romaine lettuce for maror, then the first vegetable that he has to eat has to be one that has a bracha of hadama. Okay, it means he can't eat something that has bracha of shahakol. Okay, the vegetable that he eats at karpas, if he's going to eat something that has a bracha of shahakol, he's not going to be here to this sheet to Rishonim that says the bracha from the karpas has to cover the maror later on. Okay, so a simple example, that's not negated to anybody here, is that there are people who eat butternut squash raw. Okay, there's such a thing. There are people who eat it. Of course, the regular way to eat it is cooked. The better way to eat it is cooked. So the bracha on the cooked version is hadama. The bracha on the raw version is shahakol. If you were to eat it raw, you would not be able to eat it raw for karpas, because then your bracha is shahakol, and that's not going to be good enough to cover the more that you can eat later on. Okay, but more serious, that's not so realistic. How many people are trying to eat raw butternut squash for the karpas? But no, mushrooms are not vegetable. Okay.
But it's a vegetable, but it's not.
It's not vegetable. Okay, it's not vegetable.
Hydroponic vegetable.
Well, okay. Whoa, okay, well, very serious. Okay, now, but the much more serious side is, I forgot which one of you mentioned before, is eating onions. Okay, the Aruch HaShulchan and the Chayadim both bring that the meaning by them was that they ate onions for karpas, and that makes lots of sense because it used to be that people ate onions raw. That's how people ate them, in which case the bracha on onions raw for them was hadama, and the way they could eat onions at karpas, and then they could continue to eat more later on. That would be fine. Okay, but nowadays, people don't eat onions raw. Nowadays, a person eats onions raw. Much as true about not onion Pesach. If a person eats onions raw nowadays, he would make a shahakal on it, because it's not we don't eat them raw, we eat them cooked. And therefore, excuse me, and therefore, hold on a second, on the surface, it would seem that a person should not be eating onions. Let me say this, people who have that minhag to eat onions for karpas, people who have such a minhag would have to then think about the following. They have to think of two things. First of all, this is a bigger question, which is when a person has a minhag to do something in their family, should they just do whatever their grandfather did? That's one way to do it. Or should they say what would my grandfather have done had he been sitting where I am? Because if my grandfather would be living in the times that I do, he wouldn't have used onions because onions would be sha'akal for him. So that's a bigger question as to what you should do when you have a minhag that the Alter Zaidi wouldn't have done it this way if he would have been here today. He would have done it differently. So should I just do whatever he did, like close my eyes and do whatever he did? Or should I say if he would have been here, he would have done it differently, so I'll do what he should have done. That's one question, before you get to your thing. But I'll throw in over here also another way of getting around it. Is, I didn't know this. I heard this like about a year ago, that Rabelski has this thing that he likes to eat pickled onions. Like, in the herring jars, you have pickled onions. And the reason why he likes to eat it is because he gets to then make a boy pratam on them. Okay, because it's the only chance he gets to make hadam on it, because when you eat it cooked, it's usually with other foods. And when you eat it raw, it's shahakal. And the only way he gets to eat it hadama, that's a way of eating it with a boy pratam, so he gets a special enjoyment out of it. Everybody gets, whatever floats your boat. He gets a special enjoyment out of being able to make hadam on onions, so you eat pickled onions. So if you eat pickled onions at the same, you'd be okay, because you make hadam on it.
Or fried.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if people eat it straight like that. They eat straight fried it? Do they? Okay, fine. Okay, so what do you want to say there? I'm not finished yet.
What about, does it depend on the type of an onion? Because, like, the red onions are very commonly eaten raw. They're eaten
really?
in salads and...
No, as is. The question is, do people eat it as is? Do people just pick up and take a bite out of it? I don't think that nowadays people do that.
What's what I'm saying? You're saying in times of Aruch HaShulchan, people ate onions?
People ate it. Yeah. It was the din on them is, it's Mishmur in Reish Hay that you might make hatam. You make hatam.
No, I understand it, but it's because they ate it like an apple. Like people took a bite out of it.
It's like saying.
Or is it it's eaten raw because it's like in a salad?
It's like.
It's not like a potato.
If you go to Mexico and they eat these peppers that we can't even look at, you say, how can anybody eat that thing? The people had different tastes. That was a.
I understand what I'm saying.
I was my best with an healthy ate, it was just eating onions. Very healthy.
I used to eat onions like an apple.
Oh, see, there you go. There it is.
And the other day, one of the students came up and said, "Can I have? We have onions on display just for looks." She took one of the onions, and I asked her later, "How did you cut it up?" "Oh, I just eat it like an apple."
See, okay, there we go. Okay, now, okay. So now, before we get to an answer, I'll tell you something. Before we get to a possible explanation, I don't know if it's going to be an answer. I don't know if you'll feel better, but an explanation is the Magen Avraham is talking about there are people who had a preference to eat parsley for karpas. Okay? They had a preference to eat parsley. And the Magen Avraham he wondered, why on earth would they pick up all the vegetables to pick that when parsley, l'chayra, he says, should be a shahako. Okay, think about the way we use parsley. We use parsley as a decoration. We really use it like in soup. It's as a spice. We wouldn't make a hadam on it. We wouldn't make hadam if we ate parsley straight. So he questions, why would anybody pick that? He comes up with a hezbollah as to, it could be he holds that it would be drop. It would be hadama, which what he says doesn't apply to us nowadays. Rabbi Kiva over there has a reason why maybe there was a reason why they picked karpas. It has to do with something we'll get to in a second. I'm sorry, why they picked parsley. We'll talk about it maybe later, why they had a special preference. But So it's the same question that we're asking, is that why would you pick a vegetable whose bracha is not hadama when you're missing out on this ability to then cover your maror for later on? So a possible answer is from a different kasha that the Bir Halacha asks. Okay, the Bir Halacha says, he says, we eat, one of the 5 minim that you could eat for maror, one of the 5 things you could eat is horseradish. Okay? Now, the din really what you're supposed to eat is horseradish leaves. That's really what you're supposed to eat. Okay, there's a person in Skokie who grows them. Every once in a while, sometimes before Pesach, he gives me some. He sends a shafter every year before, a whole package of them of horseradish leaves. They look very similar to romaine lettuce. Okay, and they have a similarity to them. Okay, it's even a shaila in the Magen Avraham if you could even eat the roots. Okay, the Mishnah says you're not allowed to eat the roots. Maror is not kosher from the roots, you have to eat the leaves. That's a whole shaila why we eat roots, if you're even allowed to eat roots. But the Magen Avraham says, okay, but when it says we eat roots, that's a common thing that people eat ground up horseradish, the big chunk thing, that's a root. People eat it. Okay, so the Mishnah says, the Bir Halacha says, he says, wait a second, what bracha would you make if you ate that stuff? Okay, what bracha would you eat if you ground up horseradish and you ate it? What bracha would you make? He says, you would not make hadam on it. I mean, nobody eats, even you, maybe eat onions raw, but most people don't eat spoons full of horseradish, except at the Seder. He says, he's not even sure you'd make any bracha on it. Maybe a shahaka, but he's not sure you'd even make any bracha on it. He says, so what's going on? So the answer, these things may answer each other. Because, how come people didn't eat romaine lettuce? They didn't used to eat romaine lettuce for maror. Because it wasn't around in the spring, because it was full of bugs, so they ate horseradish. That was their only choice. That's what they ate. So since they were eating horseradish, whose bracha is probably shahakal, so for them, to be able to this sheet Rishonim, they ate something that Karpas whose bracha was also shahakal. And so they ate onions also. They ate onions that were shahakal, because they were going to eat horseradish that was shahakal. So they were covering themselves by eating onion, then they could eat horseradish. But nowadays, we don't eat. Most people are being yotzei mitzvah with romaine lettuce, which is, of course, preferred over horseradish. If you can get the bugs out, it's preferred. Of course it is. The Mishnah has a list of 5 things, and it says this is the order. They're in order of preference, and romaine lettuce is preferred. So they eat romaine lettuce. Nowadays we're going to eat romaine lettuce. So if you upgraded from what Zaidi did by eating romaine lettuce, and so they have to remember Zaidi would have also upgraded and not eating onions anymore. He was only eating onions because he was going to be eating horseradish. And no, he was a chacham. He's doing like the Bir Halacha. Now horseradish is going to be shahaka, so you eat a shahaka vegetable at the beginning. We're not going to eat a shahaka vegetable. We're going to eat a hadama vegetable later on. So we should eat a hadama vegetable at the beginning. Okay. But of course, the people who don't do it are probably going to keep on eating them. And okay, fine.
In my house, we had parsley or onion. That was a choice.
Okay, I forgot to tell you. Okay, go ahead. I'll get to that in a second. Okay. Now the last thing is the last choice of things that you should not use. Okay, we had 2 recent things. One is you can't use something that you could use tomorrow, and the second is that you're supposed to use something whose brachas have done. The third thing is of what you're so to speak not supposed to use is that the Gemara says we eat that first vegetable to get the children to ask and wonder, why are we eating at this point? Why are we eating this vegetable at this time in the meal? Okay, at this time of what's going on? Why are we eating that vegetable? Okay? So, if you think about it, it's really a game. We're eating something strange, so the child will ask, why are we eating this? Okay, then what happens when the kid actually asks the question? So he says, okay, please tell me why are we eating this vegetable? Okay, so what's the answer? I asked, are we eating the vegetable so you should ask the question? That's a pretty dumb answer. You can't really say to the kid, oh, we're eating the vegetable so you should ask me why I'm eating it. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're eating the vegetable so you should ask the question? That makes sense. So the Achronim have all kinds of answers that you should give, all kinds of remuzim of eating a vegetable then, that to which to answer the child, which draws him into the rest of what we're trying to get to, which is things having to do with the Seder. Okay, so one of the answers is the Bach has 2 answers. His first answer is that the Gemara says that very wealthy people used to eat fresh, raw vegetables at the beginning of the meal. Sort of like what we do nowadays. People have salad at the beginning of the meal. We eat fresh, raw vegetables. So people who are very wealthy would eat raw vegetables at the beginning of a meal. So we say to the child that the reason why we're eating this vegetable is because wealthy people would eat like that. So tonight we're acting like wealthy people. So the kid said, no, Papa, what are we doing? You know what I mean? The whole year I've been eating beets for 6 months straight. You know, we're poor. Why are we eating all of a sudden acting wealthy? And the male, the father could tell him, because tonight it's Terach, and because tonight is Yetzias from China. So the question, the answer he's going to give is going to lead him into talking about why we're sitting at the Seder all together. Okay, so according to that, Tarsus and Erevin, basically, that they ate raw vegetables. That was like the thing the rich people ate. So that means is if you want to be able to give the kid that answer, you can't use something that's cooked. You have to eat something raw. So the people who eat potatoes, okay, nobody eats raw potatoes for karpas, as far as I know. Nobody eats raw potatoes for karpas. So if you want to use cooked potatoes for karpas, cooked vegetable for karpas, like potatoes, you want to use a cooked vegetable, you're not going to be able to give the Bach's first answer. You have to know the other two answers, which we're not talking about today. But you have to know the other answers. What are you going to tell the kid? You can tell the kid, oh, because rich people eat raw vegetables. So, it's ridiculous because you just ate a cooked potato. So you have to use one or the other. Okay? So now we're done with the three things of what things you should not pick for karpas. Okay? So now we're going to what you should pick. Okay? So my children tell me that karpas is a remez for carrots, radish, potato, celery. Okay? That's what they tell me. The lettuce karpas is a remez. That's what it's for. Okay? Somehow I didn't notice that any place in Taz and Muggen from. They should say that. They should say that was the remez, but kasha. That's what my kids say. Okay? Anyhow, so the maril is.
Well, how do carrots get thrown into there?
What'd you say?
Carrots in Europe are the same child. They only eat cooked carrots.
So they only.
Americans.
Okay, it's a good question. So you're saying is that in Europe, Karpas couldn't have stand for carrots because Steve couldn't have stood for carrots because they wouldn't have eaten raw carrots.
Potatoes also.
Yeah, so they didn't speak English either. They didn't know that remez that Karpas stand for carrots, radish, potato, celery. Okay, but I don't know.
So
the reason why people eat carrots is because you can use anything. That's the truth. Because you can eat whatever you want to.
That's right.
And it's raw.
Like carrots and potatoes got mixed in there, even though both of them are used to.
Well, nowadays we're eating raw. Nowadays we eat carrots.
Potatoes are usually eaten cooked. Maybe in Europe they don't.
No, they always ate it cooked. It was always cooked.
So it's funny how.
Right. So potatoes. Well, I'll only tell you that's only according to one answer in the Bach. Really, the Gemara doesn't say you have to give any answer. Okay, but they're kind of like scratching their heads. Well, what are you going to do now when the kid asks you the question? Why am I doing this? So we have to think of a remez that will make any sense to this. It has to make sense to lead us into where we're going. Okay, fine.
So just clarification: the potatoes were used originally because there was nothing else available.
Right. That's correct. They used that. That was a.
I mean, so the answer is our forefathers that were in Europe or wherever they were, they had no money. They had. That was the only vegetable that was available, and we're eating it because a rich person in those times had nothing else to eat.
Okay, maybe. Okay, so you want to say that? That's fine.
No, I'm just saying.
No, that's fine. Okay, so the maril is the one whose to him is attributed why we eat the vegetables we do. Why we eat karpas. And the word karpas is an Aramaic word that means celery. Okay, and the Maril says two reasons why we eat karpas. The first is very good. The most well-known reason is that backwards it spells samach perach, which is samach when there was 60, meaning 60 groups of 10,000, which is 600,000 people, worked at such hard labor, and therefore it's a remez to coming out of Mitzrayim. That's the first reason he gives. The second reason he gives is that when celery is growing out in the field, and it starts to wither, when it gets to be the fall, it starts to wither. Okay, overripe, it starts to look like straw. Okay, it starts, as it falls apart, it looks like straw, which is a reminder that the Yidden used to work with straw in Mitzrayim. Okay, so that second reason, I just throw you in on the side something, is that second reason, l'chayra, does not, it has to do with what he means is like this, in the 1700s, I believe it was in the 1700s, they bred celery, they started breeding celery different than what they had until then. Celery until then, which is what the Maril lived in the 13 and 1400s. Okay, the Maril had what we call smallage, okay, which doesn't look like exactly like the celery we have. It had very thin stalks and much more leaves. It was used, which actually people call it, the person who say it's the same thing as parsley. The leaves on the top of the celery is what was used. In Eretz Yisrael, they still use it a little like that. And they didn't eat the flesh. The part that's on the bottom, the stalk, is not what they ate. Okay? In the 1700s, they bred it differently to be the celery that we have, which has this thick stalk, and we only eat that part. You go to the fruit store, they cut off the leaves. You don't even get any leaves. Okay, in Eretz Yisrael, it's just the opposite. In Eretz Yisrael, you get only the leaves and very little stalk. People don't eat it. They call that American celery. Okay, but we eat celery, they call that American celery. They use the leafy part as a spice for soups. Okay, so when the Maril's Maril's celery, when it withered in the end of the summer, looked like straw. I'm not convinced that our celery that grows with 100 stalks all scrunched together that are really fat would look like straw at the end of the season. I'm not really sure. But anyhow, but the Maril is talking about for his kind of celery, that's what it looks like. Okay, so everybody quotes the Maril as being the makar for this for being that we should use celery. And in fact, as I said to you, the Gemara doesn't say what vegetable to use. The Gemara, in the times of the Gemara, they didn't say, when they sang Kadesh, Orchatz, when they got to the next thing, they get Orchatz. After Orchatz, didn't come Karpas, because it wasn't called Karpas, it was called the first vegetable. Okay? That name, I don't know how the song went on Uncle Moshe in those days, but after Orchatz didn't come Karpas, because the word Karpas is not in the Gemara associated with other things.
Karpas?
What?
Isn't it color?
No, it's celery.
Because that's what does it say Karpas for?
Chor Karpas with chelis?
What is Karpas?
I don't know what that means. Oh, I'm going to tell you what that means in a second. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But anyhow, they didn't call it, they didn't say Kadesh Orchatz, Yachatz. I'm lost over here. But they didn't, after Roch, I'm lost. They didn't say Karpas. The Maril is the one who said that we should call that part of the Seder Karpas. Okay? He's the one who it's associated with it. That part of the Seder is called Karpas, because he said the vegetable you should pick is the celery, which is in the Gemara is called Karpas. That's the name of the Gemara. That's a name, but he's the one who made it called Karpas. But the truth is, 200 years, the Maril quotes a Rakeach who says you should eat Karpas. The Rakeach lived 200 years before him. Okay, and the Mordechai who lived in between them, he also says you should use that. And the Seder Bamram Goyen and the Machzavitri and the Yitzris from Shabbos ago, all these people say, I knew you said Yitzris tomorrow, all of them say that you should eat, that one of the choices for the vegetable is Karpas, okay, is that you should eat, celery. But it's the reason why we associate the Maril with it is because almost all those people imply that they held it for the second reason. The reason why you should pick celery over other vegetables is because the way it withers and looks like straw. The Maril is the one, and that has nothing to do with the name Karpas. That just to do with this type of vegetable. It's the Maril who connects it to the name Karpas. The Maril who connects it to this name that says it's because it's Samach Perach. You spell Karpas backwards and spell Samach Perach. So that's why we connect it to the Maril. But really, the Maril is not the first one to say it. Okay. Now, especially for Moshe, you should know. And aside for these two reasons, there's a pirush on the Rambam called Rabbeinu Menach. Okay, it became more famous when the Frank Rambams, I don't think it was in the Rambams before, it was printed on the page before that. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so it became more famous when they printed the Frank Rambams. He brings another 3 reasons why you should eat celery, why you should pick that vegetable. One is that when in Chumash, when it says that the brothers, that Yaakov gave Yosef a concerning pasim, Rashi says that the word pasim, okay, means stripes. Okay, the word pasim comes from the lashon of karpas. Okay, if you've seen the Rashi, he connects it linguistically, or that the word comes from the word karpas. Okay, and therefore it's a remiss to us by eating celery. That part of it is a reminder of how we got into this, so to speak, into this mess in the first place. How did we get to Mitzrayim? Because he gave them this pasim, which led them to Mitzrayim. That's one. Another thing, which is what I'm trying to get you a picture of before, is that in the olden days, there was someone who won a war, some guy who did something wonderful in the war, and he decorated his helmet with celery. Okay, I don't. Like we said, whatever floats your boat. He decorated, and it became a style that when you won something, that's how you decorate. You got this thing, and in fact, there was this what I'm about to say is not from Rabbeinu Menach, but there was an Olympic kind of game called the Neiman Games. Okay, and the Greeks had this thing called the Neiman Games, and that's what they gave a guy who won. I guess he didn't get a big medal. He got a wreath of celery leaves. Okay, whatever floats your boat. Okay, so anyhow, so it's a zecher that the Yidden were victorious. Okay, so a person who wins has the celery thing. Secondly, and his third reason is that the Yidden Mitzrayim used to eat it to heal themselves from different sicknesses. So it's a zecher from Mitzrayim. Okay. You should know, Rabbeinu Menach is another thing. He has another vegetable, I don't know what it is, called the shumar, and it's a remes and leil shimurim. Okay, so anyhow, as we said, we're going to wind down. As we said, you really can eat any vegetable. The Gemara says you can eat anything. We had some recent things you shouldn't eat. I'm going to mention some of the other minhagim that they had. I mentioned to you that the Magen Avraham talks about a minute to eat parsley, which some people still do. We talked about shilas about that. A whole number of the places can talk about eating radishes. And the Aruch HaShulchan says that that's the preference to eat it. The Aruch HaShulchan doesn't say why. L'chayra, his reason is that the Maril says that the orders, just like in the Mishnah, the order of Maror is an order of preference. So too, the order that the Pais can bring for Karpas is also an order of preference, okay? With no hezbollah as to what that should be. So it happens to be that in the Seder Aram Goyim and the Machzavitri, which were written well before the Maril, celery is radishes are listed first. Okay, I don't have a clue why it should be first.
Are you saying radishes in here?
Sorry. So I haven't a clue why radish should be preferred over something else. I don't get what should be the preference, but did I say the Aruch HaShulchan? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that should be first. I take that back. The Aruch HaShulchan brings it as the thing you can use. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that it's the preferred vegetable. Okay. We talked about potatoes. Lots of people eat potatoes. We talked about a question about potatoes. People eat onions. There are also people who eat leek, wintercress, coriander. I don't know coriander. Coriander's got kidneys questions. I don't know how they did that. I'm not sure. I'm looking at my notes. I'm not sure. But as you know, nowadays there's people do all types of assorted things. You mentioned carrots, or people eat cucumbers. Eat anything. Again, that's the truth. You really could eat. You really could eat any vegetable that you wanted to. We had some choices of things you should prefer. You should avoid those things. But those are vegetables. You know, we have a minute. I'm going to finish off by telling you about the liquid you're supposed to put it into. Okay, there's a machlokes rishonim. What you're supposed to dip the first vegetable into. You are supposed to dip it into something. The machlokes is what you're supposed to dip it into. The Rambam holds that you're supposed to dip it into charoses. The Rambam says that's what you're supposed to dip it into. Tosfos said that you can't. He has reasons why you're not allowed to dip it into charoses, but after you should not dip it into charoses. So
What's the Rabbit saying that?
I don't remember.
Is that how?
That's what he says. Okay.
I think on that one.
Okay, could be. So there are reasons. There are a number of reasons why you're not supposed to. There's a number of reasons why you're not supposed to use. But after you're not supposed to use charoses. So the Beis Yosef says, look. He says, according to the Rambam, using charoses is only a preference. Even the Rambam is masking that you could use any dip that you want to. And since, according to other Rishonim, you Badafka cannot use charoses, because we can use it by mortar and reasons like that. So with Badafka you should not use it. So Mamela, Beis Yosef says you should use vinegar. Okay, that's what he says. You should use vinegar. And the Mechaber brings, when the Mechaber brings, he says you should put it into vinegar. The Ramah brings that you can put in vinegar. Sorry, the Mechaber says, into vinegar. The Ramah says you could use vinegar or salt water, and you could use wine. Also, the Taz of Agaram say the minig is to use salt water, which is what most of us use. I mention all these different choices because these choices are again not as much for this year. It's negaya because when the Seder is on Friday night and a person forgot to make the salt water, there's a shayla poskim what you should do if you forgot. How you should make the salt water on Shabbos if you forgot to, but you really don't have to use salt water. You could use just vinegar or wine or anything else. Okay, you can dip it into anything. You can dip it into salad dressing. But that's what dipping into vinegar is. Dipping into what?
We have to design mashkin.
Does it have to be zayin mashkin?
Otherwise, the workhouse.
That might be true. I'm not sure about that. The vinegar has water in it. It's a zayin mashkin, so we're okay. But you could use any of those things on it. But it comes up as an afkamina. People are very, if I can use the word, attached to using salt water because they're practicing the minute to use salt water. But when a person comes to Shabbos, if they don't know how to make salt water on Shabbos, and it's more complicated, they don't know how to make salt water on Shabbos and they forgot to make it, they really could just take some wine from Kiddush and dunk it into that, or put it into vinegar or something else, and they could be into that.